And we are live once again. Hello, everybody. Cliff Ravenscraft here.
Hi, everyone. Daphne Scott here with you, with Cliff also, together.
Daphne, what are we talking about today?
We're going to talk about, well, of course, the game of life. I know that sounds crazy because it's the title of the show, I guess, the great adventure game of life. But in particular, I would say mastering joy. So here's what I would say. The title of the show today, current working title, we sometimes change it, is Mastering Joy, Unveiling the Game of Life. And I'm going to tell a little story about how I came to this, but we're really going to talk about what are we talking about when we talk about life as a game? And so this came out of, an essay I've been writing and really defining what that means. And that's what we're going to talk about today and how it is, in fact, a game, if you choose to see it that way.
Welcome to Life, the ultimate choose-your-own adventure game with hosts Cliff Ravenscraft and Daphne Scott. Join this dynamic duo as they explore the profound concept of life as a thrilling adventure, blending ancient wisdom and modern psychology. Embrace the joy of living with presence, creativity, and playfulness. It's time to navigate the game of life together. Are you ready to play? Let the adventure begin.
Daphne, I picked up on the profound concept of life.
I picked up on adventure again today.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. That was a word that...
Are we going to go on an adventure towards peace, love, joy, and happiness today?
Yes, and here's the thing, Cliff. You're not going to have to go far.
I wish so many people would know this.
I do too, I guess. I mean, I'm glad that I have recognized it. It's always been there. It's just a matter of being able to see it, to unveil it. That's why I said unveil. I think that's the word I used. Yeah. Unveiling, right, to get the veil. And this actually, okay, so let me say a few things. You said something to me. We were talking last week. I think it was last week. It had to have been because that was last time I think we had chatted. But we were talking about how we wake up at 3 a.m. or something. Like there's just sort of this thing that people go through. And, there could be a lot of reasons. But what I had said too was like, yeah, but this happens all around the world. Like we're in different time zones, right? Like still anywhere people are at 3 a.m. And you said something like the veil is lighter.
Yep. There's something about the veil is thinner.
Yeah.
And in a more esoteric way, the mass consciousness of humanity is not so active at that time because in your geographic location, most people are unattached to their thinking brain.
Yes. So that really stuck with me. And I had read that before. I had heard that sort of idea before, and that really stuck with me. And there was something that came to me around, like, what is it when the veil is lifted on our consciousness, which is really what meditation and all the esoteric practices and the wisdom practices and all the things that we've talked about on the show, psychology, the whole thing, right? What are we really up to here? And I started to, and then I've been writing this essay about, life as a game. And I was landing on this sort of perspective of that, when I recognize fully and can see fully that my peace, love, joy, calm, whatever the sort of positive experience, not even experience, but I'll say positive emotion for lack of a better word. Mm-hmm. That word probably doesn't even encapsulate all of what I'm pointing to, but when I recognize that actually is already within me, in other words, I'm not dependent on external circumstances, people, etc., the external world to experience those things, the entire game becomes apparent. The whole world shifts on its axis in that point. My entire world shifts on its axis at that point, because now I'm going to do the doing, whatever the doing is of that day, or that, the choices, the moves, right, that I make. And I'm just not attached to outcomes as much anymore, if at all, because I'm not dependent on those outcomes to bring me peace, love, joy, and calm, right? It's actually my doing is coming from those things that's already existing. So it really gives this moment of, I think, freedom. And it gives this moment of really recognizing that now I'm choosing to do these things and it really is a game. It's just a game that I'm playing at any moment. So that's what I want to talk about today.
I love that.
Very light.
I have this conversation with many people who get it completely. I also have conversations with individuals who are dipping in and out of this level of consciousness and being able to be aware of this truth, if you will. Then there are those who are contemplating it. It seems feasible to them, but they have fears. And some of those fears it comes along with an identity crisis.
Yes.
Because if you have spent most of your life identifying with your goals or the title professionally that you hold or any other number of titles or labels that you've placed on yourself and your personality, if your identity is so attached to your personality, which is a system of beliefs about what is necessary for you to feel good things and avoid bad things and all this other stuff, to be able to experience what I think you just spoke about, the way that you described it, there has to be some level of removal of attachment to that identity. It's not necessarily that identity is bad. It's not that it's not necessary for us to interface with the world and with each other, because it is. But it's a real struggle if all of your belief is that your personality is all of who you are.
Yeah. And boy, have I been there. Yeah, let me not mislead you or anyone in the conversation, right? So I think this is great because it takes, I don't know if it takes a minute, but what I would say is in my experience, I have lived that, being very attached to my doing or very attached to a role. I would say a role, right, in life. And there's certain things, I've looked at sort of what was that when I looked at my work life, for example, and, I've had some very, I would say, large roles in companies for sure. Been at sort of what people would probably encapsulate as kind of the top of the food chain at times, for sure, in companies. And when I really looked back at it, it's very interesting to look at that and go, well, what did I think I was doing? I mean, obviously there's the money and there were parts of it that were very fun. And I did get to a point in my career and in my professional life where I recognized that it didn't really matter. I think it was easy in some ways when I looked at my identity and what I was attached to. There was a part that would forget that I was a big fish in a very small pond. Right. And so it was easy to be the big fish in the small pond, so to speak. And then I would pan out and I'd be like, yeah, but who cares? What is this getting you in the end? And we're going to talk about this on the show because I think this is I want to talk about some of the biases that we have, the blind spots that we have about kind of our future casting, right? About we think will make us happy. And the things, I think this is how we get sort of sucked into it, let alone with our senses, right? What we see, what we taste, what we feel, we can kind of get caught in that. So, but when I looked at, what did I really think I was accomplishing? There were all of these other things on the back end that did not add to my joy and did not add to my peace and my calm and did not add to, what it was I thought I was really desiring, and more so what I thought I was going to get from the external circumstances of my life. And that was when it started. That was when the consciousness and the veil started to get lifted of like, why do you believe that you are going to get your peace, your calm, your joy, etc., from what is going on externally in life? Why do you believe that the title that you have or the job that you have or the money that you make will make you this much more joyful or at peace or calm, especially when you're living a life right now where you're not experiencing those things?
Yeah.
As you could, right? It was a bit of a logic conversation I would have with myself, probably more than it coming from like a heart space. There was more logic to it. And and so anyway, the veil started to be lifted. And then I started to ask myself, how do you know what was going to make you happy a year from now anyway? How would you even know that?
I love that question.
Yeah.
I know you have an outline, and I love our outline that we're going to go into today,
Sure.
the various different aspects that you brought up. I want to share a story that I feel led to share. I, back in 2015, had like this vision that came to me, this idea. And the idea was that one day I would stand on a stage in a stadium with tens of thousands of people who are there to hear me speak an inspirational message.
Yeah, this is a great story. Well, I don't know where you're going to go with that, but I have a feeling.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I will tell you that I felt a little narcissistic at the time having the idea of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't tell anybody for a while, but it kept coming up. There's just this idea that this is something I should pursue. I want to do. And eventually one day I told a small group of people, all right, there are about 5 people in the room. And they said, Cliff, what's next for you? And this is right before I made my transition from podcast answer man to mindset answer man.
Right.
And I said, well, guys, I think I want to do mindset coaching. I want to help people unpack what their belief systems are, help them navigate what they want to create in this world. That's where my heart is. And I said, if I'm honest, I have this vision that one day I'll be out speaking a great deal on big stages. And ultimately, I have this vision that one day I'll be in a stadium with tens of thousands of people. I said, I know that sounds crazy. I had to throw that in there. It's like, just so you know, you're not, if you, as you're hearing this, you're not the only person that thinks this sounds crazy. And all 5 or 6 people in this room, let's just say it's 5 because the math is going to be easier for my punchline here.
Love it.
So all 5 people in the room says, that's not crazy. Cliff, yes, I so see that. I mean, that's a natural progression of the path that you're on.
Yeah.
And by the way, I will be at your first stadium event.
Yeah.
And then every single person in the room said that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I only need to, if it's going to be a 50,000 person event, I only need to go tell this story to 49,995 other people.
There's the math.
All of that to say that it began the journey of actually moving towards the dream, the vision.
Yeah.
And Daphne, at first, I genuinely, with all of my heart, with full integrity, can tell you that the vision was not a narcissistic, ego-driven thing. It was literally impact, influence. I want to inspire as many people. I want to have the biggest dent I can make in the world in a positive, profound way. It genuinely started with that.
Yeah.
And I began to start working towards it. Actually, I began to start talking about it a great deal. And I was like, 10 to 15 years from now, I'm going to do this. 10 to 15 years from now, I'm going to host this. 10 to 15 years. And finally, my friend Ray Edwards says, Cliff, you've been saying that for 2 years now. So shouldn't it be 8 to 13 years from now? He says, and then he said these words, why not next year?
Yeah, why not?
And then I started to think about it. And what happened was, okay, well, if I were going to move in, I don't think I'm going to have a stadium event next year. But what I can do is start out and see if people are interested in coming to smaller events. So I began hosting workshops in my home, filled it with 14 people, which you've been in my studio. I have a workshop space that I built here called the Next Level Studio. And so I packed that out several different times. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to do a conference called Free the Dream Conference. People came from all over the world, did Free the Dream 2018. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, okay, I'm ready to blow this thing to the roof. I'm ready to take it to the next level, which is my persona. That's how I get involved. But somewhere along the lines, all of a sudden, some other motivations got tied into this. And I've recognized just how much I was driven by a desire for financial certainty, driven by a desire for significance, to be seen as important and admirable in the eyes of others, to be well respected, to be seen as valuable. And over time, what happened was my pursuit of growing Free the Dream was starting to actually I was losing my peace. I was losing my joy. I was losing everything that I thought that I would ultimately get when I have a stadium of tens of thousands of people.
Yeah.
I lost the fact that I had all of that every single day already.
Yeah.
And when that came to me, I'll never forget the summer between Free the Dream 2018 conference and Free the Dream 2019 conference. I discovered the prosperous coach method. I started to read and study about this, and I'm like, listen, I'm finally going to have $1 million year, and by golly, I'll be able to just rent the stadium myself and give tickets away for free, and we'll do this Billy Graham style, you know. And I'm just like starting to think all sorts of wild stuff. But what I recognize is like, wait a second, this isn't the same motivation. And it was very clear inside of me. And I was losing that joy. I was losing that peace. I was losing all that stuff. And I'm like, and eventually it just out of nowhere, I was thinking about hiring Rich Litvin as my coach, the author, one of the authors of the Prosperous Coach Method, or the Prosperous Coach book, for $100,000. And I'm like, okay, if I hire him, this is going to be the motivation of the skin in the game that I need. That's going to cause me to finally take these actions that I've been putting off for a very long time.
Yeah.
And then I realized I had my first session with him. I was about ready to have my second session with him. And I got to the second session and something happened. And this is my unveiling moment. The veil was lifted.
Yeah, the veil was lifted.
And he says, he says, Cliff, what can I help you with today? I said, I don't know, because something has shifted in me. He says, tell me more. I said, well, and I told him everything that I just told you. And then I said, something's occurred though, is I recognize that I already have everything that I could ever want. I already have the ability to influence and impact the lives of tens of thousands. In fact, over the last decade or more, I have impacted millions of people. And I recognize how much of what I was the track that I was on was ego driven. You know, this desire for peace and joy and all the accolades and all the stuff that would come from others. But it just, something spoke to me inside of me that says, there's nothing that a stadium full of people could ever give you that's not already yours.
Wow.
Right here, right now. He says, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, in my conference, Free the Dream 2019 is coming up in 2 weeks. And I'm already going into it asking myself, do I even want to continue this event? Now, also think about the universe and God speaking to my heart and having me have that decision. And I had already made the decision after Free the Dream 2019 to not do Free the Dream 2020.
Right. And thank goodness.
Which, by the way, would have never happened anyway because of COVID.
Right. Wow. Well, Cliff, I appreciate you sharing that, because I think there's nothing, well, first of all, that experience that you had, I call it losing the plot. And I've had it too. I lose the plot, right? I think, and as I was thinking through the biases that we have and kind of how we're fairly dreadful at predicting what's going to really make us happy anyway. And I was thinking through that, all the times that I've lost the plot in my life, right? Where I'm like, oh, if I work and get this next promotion or get this next certification or get this next degree, then, I think anytime we hear ourselves going, once this happens, then you're losing the plot. If I had to give anyone one sort of way to catch it, just notice that. Once this happens, then I can, do the things that I want to do. Then I can be happy. Then I'll finally be able to relax. Good luck.
I had a potential client I was working with, brought him in. He's in a situation where currently he's only averaging about $5,000 a month in his business. The most he's ever generated in all of his business pursuits for the past 15 to 20 years was $12,000 to $15,000.
Okay.
But I asked him, hey, how can I serve you today? What would you like to walk away from this session with? And he says, a clear strategy of how to get to $50,000 a month in my business. And I'm like, okay, tell me what would that give you that's not already yours? And then I got the story. I will finally be able to be happy. I will have peace. I will be able to experience the good things in life and all this other stuff. And he says, Cliff, my number one struggle in life right now, every bit of stress in my life is because I don't have enough money. And I said, would you be willing to allow me to potentially express a different perception of the world, happiness, money, and stress? I'm not suggesting that I'm right, but I'd love to actually give you a different perception based upon what I've experienced in my own life, coaching hundreds and even seeing thousands of other people on this path. And the biggest thing that I shared is like this. If you are currently earning $5,000 a month in your business consistently right now, and you're experiencing massive amounts of stress, people aren't paying their bills on time, people are canceling their contracts, and you are experiencing no peace, no joy, no happiness, and everything in your mind would be solved if you could just get to $50,000 a month. My understanding is that when we get more income, it amplifies who we already are. So that is a 10x jump in income. I'm going to tell you right now, the issues of stress that you're experiencing need to be solved before you go and 10x your income.
Yep.
Because if you don't do this, you're going to 10x your stress.
Well, and let me put an asterisk on that even more so, because you and I both know about the upper limit problem. Right. And so I think you're exactly right that when we're not prepared for that, I see money as energy. So when we're not prepared for that level of energy, there was some feedback and I don't know your client. So, I'm speaking extemporaneously here, but, when we're not prepared for that, the universe is sort of doing us a favor by saying like, hey, look, okay, here it comes. This is a lot of energy. Are you prepared for this? We typically will do something to bring ourselves back down to where we're comfortable anyway. To your point about just 10xing the patterns that we already have. And I think there's absolute truth to that. And what I imagine you were coaching this person on too is also like, you can be happy and calm and joyful right now. And by the way, and let me be really clear, I do believe that people need to earn a living wage. Like I do, like I think,
oh yeah,
right. I'm not saying like, just go out and be broke. That's not what I'm advocating at all. Nevertheless, I think when we are putting ourselves in the space of being dependent on external circumstances, it's a setup because we don't control any of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And my thing is that, listen, let's get you to a livable wage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in the process of that, let's work on some emotional intelligence and also situational awareness.
Yeah.
Let's evaluate some business processes and strategies that need to be the foundation of the growth towards and stuff. And you know what he told me is, I'm not interested.
Oh,
Cliff, really, if I just want strategies and ideas for 50K. Now, I work with people who make 50K in a month and more and all sorts of things. So I gave this individual 10 ideas of what he would need to do to generate, or what he could do to generate $50,000 a month. And he poo-pooed every single one of them.
Did you hear a lot of the yeah, but?
Yep. The yeah, but. And then it's like, but Cliff, here's the two products I'm already heavily invested in. One is a $1,500 product and one was an even cheaper product. And I'm like, listen, do you know how many people you need to generate $50,000 a month in this? It's interesting.
It didn't work.
It's interesting. It didn't work. And, that's why I do the prosperous coach method is to see if somebody is ready for that conversation, because you can definitely increase your income. There's no doubt about it. You could get a $50,000 a month if you just take some bold actions and have some courage. But boy, if you don't have the foundation of this understanding of where do your emotions come from, it's dangerous stuff.
I agree. And ultimately it doesn't get, and again, speaking from my own experience, it doesn't ultimately get you where you want to be. I mean, I have taken on roles and titles and all the things I just mentioned. And really when I would look back at it, I'm like, what is all the stress that I've added to my life? That isn't, again, no problems with stress in and of itself, but it wasn't healthy. I noticed where my overall quality of life completely took a back seat for years. And I had written in one essay that I wrote, it's great if you have all the money and the title, but now your plants are dead and you haven't talked to your family in 6 months. You haven't seen your friends. How much vitality is there in your life at that point? And I think, right. I don't know about you, Cliff, but when I coach people and I'm working with them and I watch the amount of, they wonder, there's sort of this essence of like, they wonder why they can't seem to get it all together or keep it all together. And I'm like, it's likely you've probably lost a little bit of the plot, just a little
Yeah.
bit. Yeah, just a little bit. You're losing the plot. And so when we can really kind of go into this unveiling for ourselves and start asking ourselves what's really true about this, I think it's very helpful. And then I want to talk about really some of the biases that we have that can get us, that keep that veil, sort of keep us covered in the veil. And one of them, and you kind of mentioned this too, one of them was the impact bias, where we overestimate, I'm going to read this because it's in my notes. We overestimate the impact certain things will have on our lives, both positive and negative.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Like I was thinking, like, once I get this degree at the University of Pennsylvania, then I'll really be able to talk about these things like I want to. I'm not saying the education wasn't valuable. I'm not saying that I didn't learn a ton and I met new people and it was all very great. But when I really rewind the clock and look at what that time period of my life, so this would have been 2013, 2014, what was going on in my life at the time. Essentially, I had 2 full-time jobs. I was doing a master's degree at the University of Pennsylvania in a year. And wondering why I wasn't sleeping. I gained probably 25 pounds over the course of a year and a half. Was not exercising. There was no space. I mean, there was no space in my life for really anything other than that.
Yeah.
And so, when I looked back at and the stress was, it was inordinate. I mean, it was just, I couldn't even get a handle on how much stress I was under. So, but when I look at what was I trying to accomplish? What was I really up to? And there was just this, then I will be able to. And none of that was true, because what was actually happening, I was already doing anyway. I just I was a coach and I wanted to work with clients and I was doing all that. And I just created this sort of environment for myself. Yeah.
That's the part of my thing. It's like if I have stadium fulls of, if I have at least one event where tens of thousands of people came, at that point people will take me seriously, and I should never have a problem with people wanting to have me as their coach. I mean,
ever,
come on,
ever again.
It's like, hello, Cliff, maybe you should just take you seriously. And if you have confidence in yourself, people will that confidence that you have will rub off on others, and so that's another thing. But this impact bias, I don't want to leave this thought before we talk about what catastrophizing is as well.
Yeah,
this is something that the human mind has a capacity to do to no end. And that is, we have a scenario. I don't know about you, Daphne, but as a full-time self-employed business owner, there have been times where it's like my income.
I like how when you said that you had jazz hands.
Yes. Full-time self-employed business owner. Nothing is actually guaranteed. Risk is everywhere.
It was like your catastrophizing body came out at that moment.
I know.
So good.
So here I am. It's like, oh man, things are going really great. I'm ready to head out on vacation. It's just like I am in one of those flows when it comes to income for my business. This is wonderful. And then all of a sudden the text message comes in. Hey, Cliff, do you have time to talk? And then I'm like,
no.
No. And then this person's friend, who is also my mastermind, I get a text message from him about 25 minutes after that. Hey, do you have any time to talk today? And these are 2 people who within 45 minutes of each other, they texted me to see if they could have a quick chat with me. Both of them had been in my mastermind group for 4.5 years. Both of them are attorneys. And it turns out they wanted to talk to me because after 4.5 years, they were both going to exit the Next Level Mastermind to invest what they were investing in the Next Level Mastermind into a program specifically made for lawyers that would help them take their practice to some new heights.
Okay.
And I got to tell you, the catastrophizing in my head was horrifying. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was like, this is the end of my world. These guys, okay, if these guys leave, everyone else is going to leave in the mastermind group.
Yes.
There is, if these guys leave, everyone else who has been, because the Next Level Mastermind is a 1-year commitment, but you can stay in as long as you want after that. Everybody else in the group has been in the group for more than a year.
Yeah, this is going to
This is just going to cause
ruin everything.
Well, everyone is obviously going to ask, maybe it's time for me to leave as well.
Clearly.
And it's like, of course I'm going to be homeless in about 3 weeks from now.
I'll have no money. We have no food,
I will have no credibility.
No
Nobody would ever listen to anything I ever have to say.
I just got the line from Dumb and Dumber. We have no jobs, no food, no water. All our birds' heads are falling off.
All of our birds' heads are falling.
If you don't know the reference, everyone just go see the movie.
Anyway. I remember the movie, but I don't remember that quote. But knowing the movie, I can
Makes
I
total
have
sense.
the picture in my head. Yeah.
But yeah, so you're catastrophizing.
Yeah, that's exact. So basically, it's the impact bias of this is going to have far more negative consequences in my mind than what it really will have.
Yes.
And in fact, it had the absolute opposite effect.
Isn't that interesting and curious?
Yeah.
And sort of mystical?
Yeah.
So I noticed you're not homeless. It doesn't seem like.
No, we skated by. Actually, it actually ended up being a really, minus my attachment and to the control of the situation and my beliefs that these people, since they've been in it for 4.5 years, obviously they're 43 years from now they're still going to be in the group, and all of those other expectations that I had outside of the suffering that I put myself through for probably about 3 or 4 or 5 days. Yeah. And this, by the way, on vacation. Not a good time to have this kind of experience.
Not ideal.
But what happened was that it ended up these guys left and went on and to do some amazing things that both said. It sounds
like
Cliff,
you really influenced them too. I mean, it sounds like they took something and like ran with it that they were learning in the group.
Both of them have left me testimonials that my life would not be where it is today. I would not be in the place had it not been for this experience, this environment that you've created. And their lives today are far exceedingly different, so exponentially different from when they first joined the mastermind group. And that's awesome. And then everyone else, the week after everybody left, we had an open discussion, open hot seat. What does this mean? Does anybody else want to leave? Yeah. I just basically open it up. It's like, hey, none of you are committed long-term to this group. You're month to month at this point. And they're like, no, we're committed. In fact, I will tell you, Cliff, right here, right now, I'm in for at least the next 12 months.
Yeah.
And I'm like, sweet, wonderful. And what are we going to do? Well, here's what I think we should look and open it up to this and that. And lo and behold, I immediately went to town on marketing this thing. And within 6 months, I was making 3 times the amount from the group as a paid mastermind group because I doubled the rate and I included one-on-one coaching with the mastermind. And all of a sudden, if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have had this season of life where I was flying high for a very long time.
Yeah. And it gave, you really, once you can get out of your own way, right? Like you're catching all the catastrophizing you're doing. And once you can sort of get out of your own way on that, then the creativity comes back online. And you're like, well, yeah. And again, I think this is very practical too. I'm a practical kind of gal, right? So it's like, you're not going to sit back and just be like, well, I guess it's just going to all fall apart. I'll do nothing. This is going to be horrible.
Just for a couple of hours and at the most 2 to 3 days at this point.
Yeah, at the most 2 to 3 days. And then the creativity comes back online and you're sort of like, well, how could, if I'm to take some action here, if I'm still playing this game, which I am, then how do I take some action here? And I do want to provide for my family. I would like to have income, I still want to do that. Seems like a fun idea until you don't. And then you take some action and you get creative and it turns out better than it was to begin with, which is shocking.
I can't promise that will be the same for everyone in all scenarios. And also, better than it was before is very subjective way of perceiving the world, because
that's very
oftentimes
true. Very true.
This is another thing I've learned in life. There are so many things in my past where I was going through a season and I thought it was an incredibly challenging, difficult, I would say horrible time that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. And today I am who I am, or I have experiences that I have today
Mm.
that are so life enriching that had that not happened, wow, if I had to do it all over again, I'd go through it again in a heartbeat.
Yeah. And
It was that worth it.
well, and that's the other side of that, right? Like we think it'll have we think certain circumstances will have a way more negative impact on us. And then when we get through, if that thing happens, but when we get through it, then it actually becomes something that allowed us to develop part of who we are, our resilience, whatever. However, there's a lot of science on this, right? Where people become more resilient, they bounce back, they develop a different way of seeing the world through things that seem like tragedy and hardships and, the challenges of life. So yes, absolutely.
So
And
that's impact bias. What
yeah,
else
impact
is
bias. All right.
standing
So
in the way?
well, the hedonic adaptation, we touched on this a little bit, I think, in one of our shows, but really the hedonic treadmill, right? We adapt to the things. Then I think this is probably, if I had to zero in on any one bias, because I think this fits in also with another one of them, this is probably the one I pay attention to the most, where how I would describe it is we lose our appreciation for the things that are here right in front of us right now. We adapt to it. So we get the new car, and the new car is really cool for, I don't know, 6 months, maybe 7 months, 8 months. But by month 9, month 10, we're getting into it, and it feels like the same old car, right? We're married. We look at our spouse every morning, like there they are again. We don't appreciate the nuances. We just lose sight of that. And that creates, they call it the hedonic treadmill, where we're just trying to acquire more, get more, be more. And we're just on this treadmill. We can't get off of it. And I really see that fitting into us losing our sense of appreciation for the day-to-day things and what we would describe as what could be the mundane. And I remember very clearly living this in my 30s. I mean, it almost was like I was in an existential crisis. I'm like, how many times am I going to have to do the dishes? Am I going to always be doing the laundry? Just the day-to-day mundane things. And I was in a conversation with a friend of mine last week. We were talking about performing. And he said, don't you just love it though? You're on the stage and you perform and it just feels so great. And then, the next thing you know, you have to go back and take the trash out. And he's like, it's such a letdown. And I was so dialed into this because I'm like, oh, I know that feeling. I'm like, yeah, I used to be a sucker for that too. Right. I used to be a sucker for that sort of part of my identity that wanted that kind of the I don't know what the persona is, but I knew the trap. And I said, yeah, but it's all taking out the trash. That's all it is. Right. It's all doing the dishes. And so there, this appreciation that we have for the ordinary drifts away, what I would call the ordinary, right? The day-to-day stuff of life. And so we just stay on this treadmill, right? And that actually is a bias that we have that can really drive us to lose the plot and pull that veil down over our eyes that our joy, our peace, and love is already inside of us to begin with. There's really nothing external that we need to acquire. Yeah.
The anecdote, I think, to that barrier to experiencing our peace and our joy, I think, is being appreciative of the mundane. And actually, it's just reframing.
Yeah.
Because there is nothing in this life that's mundane.
Yeah.
I mean, wow, what a gift it is to be able to take out the trash.
Yeah, to do the dishes.
And even to do the dishes. And so think about, I mean, some people might say, oh gosh, here comes the Pollyanna. Okay, stand by, here it comes. All right.
Here she is, everyone.
So I will tell you what, I have seen some places in the world where trash collection is not a thing.
Yeah.
All right. And people their children are dying from disease, and rats are in, infestation and all this other stuff because trash, there is no such thing as sanitation. There is no such thing as trash removal and stuff like this. And people just pile their trash up anywhere and everywhere. And I've witnessed this in a number of places.
Yeah.
And to think that, wow, there are people in this world who wake up once or twice a week, get into a truck that doesn't smell that great, and they drive to my house and they pick up a can and take all of that waste away.
Incredible.
What an incredible gift that is.
Amazing.
And to think that there's a beautiful can that is so large that I didn't have to make that can, and it's got wheels on it. And so I remember as a kid, I used to have to pick up things and things would fall over and it's just, but man, the cans that are there today, and I just
like
will it.
the original metal trash can.
Yes, all
like
this other stuff. It's like, and I mean, what a gift it is. And you mentioned the dishes. It's like, wow, have I ever thought about the fact that in my cabinet are clean dishes to eat on?
Yeah.
I mean, what an incredible gift that is. Sanitary. It's been sanitized and it's clean and free from germs, and they're in a cabinet that happens to be in a kitchen that happens to be in my house.
Indoors.
That has a roof over it. That I'm indoors, air conditioned, and I live on a planet that still is precisely the right distance from the sun to keep me from burning to death or freezing to death. This is amazing.
It is amazing. It's
wow.
It's phenomenal, really. It's phenomenal.
I come home from vacation and I get to take the trash out and I get to do my own dishes.
Yeah, and you get to even go on vacation.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. You just brought to mind a book that I read and I want to share a quote from it. It's called The Unexpected Joy of the Ordinary. It's written by Catherine Gray. She wrote, I read that book first. She actually wrote a book. She's written several, but the other book that I read of hers was The Unexpected Joy of Being Sober. She had a alcohol addiction, and her book, which both of them are phenomenal. But her book, The Unexpected Joy of the Ordinary, was so, I mean, it's so incredibly well written, and she's very funny, but she has this quote and I wanted to read it. It says, "Victory wears off. Agony does too. Euphoria fades, despair too. Love wanes, heartbreak too. And life events that we expect to clinch eternal happiness or spell cataclysmic lifelong doom just don't." And she writes in the book about all these things just like that. Like she was writing, like one of her games and favorite things is when she can get all the groceries in the door in one trip. Right. She gets all the bags. And I just remember thinking about this, especially when I lived in Chicago, because there was, you were always going up and down stairs to your apartment or your condo or whatever. And I just remember that feeling of like, oh, can I get all these bags hooked on both arms and make it up the stairs in one trip so I don't have to go back out to the car? Just simple things like that are just so fun and that you can appreciate so much and not taking them for granted. Right. All the things you just mentioned. So yes. And I think we have a bias that can keep us on that hedonic treadmill in many ways. And that can drive more this sort of like, I'll finally be happy when I can get this thing. And just seeing that we can be happy already. So the other one is, I think this one, I'm going to talk about this one. The focusing illusion. And this fits in a little bit, I think, with the impact bias. But when we think about the future, we often only focus on one aspect of the thing we think we want.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think your Free the Dream story is really good. The conference story is really good because I imagine you were focused on one thing and didn't.
Oh yeah, I could tell you.
Okay.
I will tell you, Daphne. Here's how focused it was. I could close my. I took my wife Stephanie to see a Taylor Swift concert in Chicago. Which stadium is that?
Probably. I'm sure she was at the United Center. Huge.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's huge.
So massive stadium, and I intentionally bought her front row seats on the floor, and I did it selfishly. You might. It's like, gosh, Cliff, you must be such a great husband. Yes, I am.
Yes,
but that's not the whole. That's not the point. So I did it for me.
Okay.
I did it because I went there to close my. I went there to. We got there early. I went right up to the stage because we were in the pit area. So right up at the stage, and I just looked at all the people in the stands, and I imagined, wow, these people are. And I closed my eyes and I listened to the sound. With my eyes closed, I felt the temperature of the stadium. I felt the blowing of the air movement machines and all this other stuff. I smelled the smell of the place. And I'm like, yes, these people are here. And it's like, and so I did enough of that research to know that my focused attention on this is how great it will feel to have this energy in this room on this. What I didn't focus on is the idea that if I'm ever at such a place in a celebrity status that I could actually have 50,000 people come to a stadium to see me, that my anonymity of what little, I have,
Yes.
which I have plenty,
Thank goodness me too.
The idea that Stephanie and I couldn't go out to dinner without being interrupted 10, 15 times. Can I get a selfie with you every single? And what about paparazzi? And then the tabloids and all the negative things and the haters. And I'm like, I never focused on any of that, Daphne.
Yeah. Isn't that incredible? And the work that goes, and the work that goes into putting a show of that immensity, right? That talent, that creating that again and again. I mean, artists go through that so much. Like they've created one body of work. When's the next album coming out? When's the next album come? When's the next great song? When's the next number one hit? When's you and I both watched, actually, we watched the Get Back files, I guess they're called. Of the Beatles.
Yes. The documentary of the Beatles put together by Peter Jackson on Disney Plus.
Yes. And we both watched it. Well, you told me about it. So I went and watched it. I know we both seen it. And, you can appreciate as they are attempting to write these songs, they are talking about where the Beatles are headed next, the pressure that they were being put under to I think they hadn't performed live, in 4 years when that came out?
Something like that.
Yeah, something. I mean, it had been a period of time. And the pressure that they were being put under to do more live performing, to start traveling again, none of which it seemed like any of them really wanted to do, by the way. Maybe Paul, but the rest of them seemed very non-committed to it. And just the pressure they were under, like no one considers that. All you see is their end, the final production of their body of work. And no one's thinking through like, wow, what did they go through to do that? What was that like? How much pressure they were under. Yeah. These are the parts that people don't really consider in any vein, I think. Yeah.
You bring up the Beatles documentary, Get Back, and I'm wondering, because this just occurred to me. What was the timing of their last live appearance and their decision to no longer do live appearances, and the timing of their trip to India?
A great question. I don't know when they had gotten back from India, and they all came back at sort of different times. I think George Harrison was the last one to come back. So I don't know what the timing was of that. Then they did the Get Back, they were writing what became the new album. I don't know. It's a great question. I just know that they hadn't performed live at least for 4 years. I'm pretty sure that's right. Yeah. It was an extended period of time for the amount of work and the amount of concerts and traveling they had been doing. There definitely was a big pause, and they were being put under quite a bit of pressure to keep doing that. And then ironically, they did their rooftop show, if you will. And that was it.
That was it.
That was their last.
Which was great, by the way. I love it.
And I'm glad they had it on film. I'm like, thank you.
The reason why I bring this up, because in our intro, we talk about bringing in ancient wisdom and tradition. And obviously they went and they were with a Hindu guru and working with transcendental meditation and stuff like that. George Harrison is arguably the one who was the most influenced by that experience. I think all of them were influenced, but certainly George continued to follow a path very similar to that line of philosophy, if you will.
Yes.
And it's ironic to me that he's the one who is like, listen, this fame isn't as important as I once thought it was.
Yeah.
And it became very clear for me. And what I love about it is he was the one who was willing to walk away.
Yes.
Into the unknown. And he was the one. And when he did walk away, and of course he came back, but then he walked away. Then they all kind of walked away. Yeah. But when he walked away, it seemed like he is like, listen, there's no pursuit here of greater happiness and joy by creating something. But then all of a sudden, he wrote some beautiful songs afterwards, some great albums, and he created the Traveling Wilburys, which absolutely was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And just all the stuff that came, and it just, because he was in alignment with himself. And it's not, he was still doing in the world, but not chasing after happiness, not chasing after joy, not chasing after peace. He had all of that. And from that foundation, he created whatever he wanted to create.
Yeah.
And it was good.
It was, yeah, to say the least. I also imagine, what came out of those videos, not to put words in his mouth or his experience, but from what I could gather on what was shared and what showed up in the film, his creativity felt like it was being stifled too. And and that's very clear. Paul and John were very clearly the songwriters and had a bond that, they'd been playing together since they were 12, 13. So I think there was some of that too. And to your point, I think it's finding that like he wasn't dependent, right? He didn't just stay and stifle his own creativity because he could only do it in that band. He was willing to say, well, this has run its course. I mean, it kind of reminds me of your guys in the mastermind, right? Like this has run its course and I'm not dependent on just this thing to keep doing this. And my identity isn't attached to being a Beatle, which it very easily could have been, especially at that time period. And he was willing to let go, right? And not be attached to the outcomes and not know what was going to happen. He could have gone on to do a solo thing and it could have flopped immensely. Yeah. Great example. So yes. So us knowing what is really going to bring us the happiness, right? Skipping over the joy, sort of these biases that we have, and then being able to lift that veil. I wanted to touch on these things, these next few things too, that I think when we really look at what can happen when we're not paying attention is just life is completely impermanent. There is nothing that's going to last forever. And I think when we can get with that deeper wisdom, I think we really can appreciate why focusing on our external circumstances and situations so much can eventually become a detriment, right? Why, right? Because nothing's going to last. I mean, I have stuff here. It's all going to fall apart and break, stop working inexplicably, which it does, right? I'm going to lose the people that I love most closest to me. They will die in a way, right? Physical body. So there's just these parts of living that I think there's an unsatisfactoriness. I was working with a team last week. Yeah, last week. And, I'm like, just replace the words, like anything that you complain about, you can just put different words in there, right? If it's not about the kid screaming, it'll be about the guy who doesn't do his job well, right? Like you can just replace the word. There's always this little unsatisfactoriness that we have that we can find, right, in our life, something that we can complain about. And then I wanted to talk about this one. I think
before you go on to impermanence, I want to say a couple of things. So a quote that has come up, first and foremost, if you haven't listened to the 2005 Stanford University commencement speech that Steve Jobs did,
it's my favorite.
Go watch that today.
So good.
Even if you've watched it 100 times like I have, go watch that again. Anyway, he talks about the fact that each day, and I look in the mirror and I ask myself, if this were my last day, would I want to do what I'm doing today? And if the answer is no to that question too many days in a row, it's time for change.
Yeah.
And I love that. And he also mentioned about remembering that you'll soon be dead is one of the greatest ways to fill in the blank. It's a great statement. Go check out this. I don't want to ruin the whole thing if you haven't seen it yet. It's amazing. It was the best Steve Jobs quote I've ever heard in my life. So there's that. The other thing is I've heard several times just in passing in various different places, people referring to the idea that 400 years from now, nobody will know who we are. Most of us anyway.
Yeah.
And 400 years from now, nothing we did.
4 weeks from now.
well, but still 400, this is the quote, the 400 years.
Okay.
And it reminds me of something, this whole idea of life and permanence and the importance of all the things. One of the things that I have done is I've got so many different journals, and I had this process where I'm going to have one place where everything I've ever journaled is available, and it's going to be in this digital format and everything. And so I would sometimes write entire, journals, like physical journals, and I'd take pictures of every page, and I would do it so that's OCR'd and it can all be searched and all this stuff. And I spent probably many, many months of my life just on this archival process.
Yeah.
And eventually I got to the place where it's like, okay, now every time I journal, I want to make sure that if I journal in this physical thing that I do this, create a copy over here and do this. And it's like, but there are sometimes I want to do a digital version of my journal, and the best app for that is this one. Well, gosh, should I print that out and cut it out and paste it into the physical journal? And I'm like, what am I doing? I got to the place where I couldn't stand journaling anymore. This is too much work.
You're like, even as I'm telling the story right now, just listening to you, I'm exhausted.
I know. And so eventually I'm like, gosh, I know I've got like 8 months into the archival process.
Yeah.
And the thing is it goes all the way up until about mid last year, 2023, when I said, screw this. I'm just going to journal wherever I journal.
And if I can find it later, great.
Piece back. I got my piece back.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, isn't that great?
It's just like, I need this to be a permanent record, and it needs to be available to not only myself, but and I know enough about my kids that they're never going to care to actually read any of this stuff. And life is yet to be determined on whether or not I would be like an Alan Watts one day, where somebody would want to listen to all of my archives of everything. But whether or not anybody does or does not, it just doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, it got to a point
anymore.
Anymore.
It did for about 8 or 9 months while I was in the process of convincing myself of the need for the permanence of this record.
Yeah. And that's it, right? Striving for some permanence, some sense of, how do I become immortal in some way, right? Can it really just all just go away? Well, we don't know.
So one other thing, I shared with my green room mastermind, hey guys, Kajabi now has podcasting, and you guys may remember I'm under a special plan where I have unlimited products.
Yeah.
So every podcast is a product, and I have unlimited products. They made a big mistake giving Cliff unlimited products and saying that a podcast is a product, because somebody's going to be taking advantage of that. And so I told her, I said, I've moved all, at the time I had 44 or 45 podcasts. I said, I've moved all of my podcasts over to Kajabi. Everything is switched over and blah, blah, blah. And one of my friends said, Cliff, have you ever thought, what if something happens to Kajabi and they decide to stop supporting it since it's a brand new feature? What if it doesn't go over too well? What if it just goes away? What if this? And I said, you know what? I'm at a place in my life right now. If that happens, my identity is not tied to the fact that all of those podcasts are live are on the internet.
Yeah. Yeah. It just wouldn't be an issue. And, I imagine, knowing you have all the original files anyway. It's not like
I have the original files.
Right.
Yeah. And there are things that I could do to try to recreate things, but when it's all said and done, it's not a big deal. Yeah. One of the things that I did is I had a WordPress site with many thousands of blog posts.
Yeah.
And WordPress for me was a security hole, like massive.
Yep.
And finally, one day when I like, why am I continuing to pay, this crazy fee for all the security that I'm paying for and somebody else to manage all this stuff, when I could just have what I want on Kajabi and just delete the rest? And they're like, Cliff, no. Do you know how much credibility you will lose in Google if you delete that domain and all of those thousands of posts? You have so much, I can't remember what it's called, but you have so much thing in Google. And I'm like, listen, guys, if people want to find me and they can't find me, that's fine. And I'm just not worried about that stuff anymore. And I backed up all the database. I have everything. And I just hit delete.
Yeah.
Gone.
Isn't that freeing?
Yes.
Well, so what I hear is like, you can see the part of you that in the way that we can get sort of sucked into this idea of trying to strive for some level of permanence.
Yes.
Right. For some level of predictability and permanence, which we've talked about the predictability on the show too, but striving for that. And it just isn't so. Nothing lasts forever. It just doesn't. And so when we find ourselves striving again, I think that these are some of the biases or some of the ways we can get sucked into sort of that bail. I want to shift because I think you're going to, so impermanence, unsatisfactoriness. I want to talk about this. You brought up, I thought so great at the beginning of the show, the identity. I want to talk about this too, is sort of the not self, like really seeing that a lot of, and I'll say this, and then I know you'll have a lot to say on this topic, but a lot of how, what a Daphne is dependent on so many things that are not really even living over here, right? In other words, the identity becomes sort of a reflection of the context in which I'm in at the time, which has a lot to do with it. and is dependent on just so many other factors versus there being a true existent self over here. And I know that can seem a little, I'll give an example in a second. It can seem a little foreign at times to realize this, but if I lost an arm, am I still a Daphne? Right? If I lost a leg, am I still a Daphne? At what point, if I pulled all the parts of the car apart, at what point does it start not becoming a car? And at what point does it become a car? And I kind of hold on to those examples because I think that helps when I'm working with my own identity, when I'm working with sort of this persona, recognizing that it has utility. It's helpful, but also recognizing that it can become a real challenge if you get attached to it. So I wanted to bring that up too. And you really started the top of the show that way, which I thought was just great because that's where I was headed, is how the veil stays over us to think that we have to, search and strive in this life to maintain a certain part of who we are. And really, it's so dependent on so many factors. There's just no way to maintain that either.
Yeah. I never really understood the Hindu concept of karma until I read the book Karma by Sadhguru.
Okay.
And it was an eye opener for me. And I know I'm going to oversimplify it, and I'm only talking about one aspect of it. But one of the things that I recall very vividly is this discussion of karma is kind of like a collection of memory. It's carrying with you the memory of all the things that you believe, all the things you like, all the things you dislike, all the things you want and desire. It is the accumulation. If you think about it, it's kind of like you carry a bag on your shoulder, and in that bag is everything that makes up your persona, your personality.
Yeah.
And so the thing is there's, and that what I was getting at is how much, me wanting to have this archive is I want to hold on and have as much stuff in my bag as possible. And I realized I'm a hoarder. It's like, wait a second. I want to hold on to everything. And I'm like, why don't I just lighten the load? It's okay if some of this stuff gets deleted and removed from the bag, and the whole idea. And again, I know I'm way oversimplifying this, but the idea is for us to have enough karma or memory to give the ego its necessary form to interact in the world, to be in the world but not of it.
Yes,
is to hold on to the things that are necessary for us to interact in a way that our true essence desires, in a way that is love, compassion, peace, and joy. And to try not to put too much stuff in our bag across our shoulder that causes us to lose our awareness of our true identity.
Yeah. And I love that. And then there are only certain things that can go in that bag and certain things that can't, or certain things that can and can't. Right. So you sort of become this weighed down, limited existence as well. And it doesn't feel very gamey.
Yeah.
There's really not a game you can play.
Did you hear the story about the two monks? So there was a master and his disciple, if you will, these two monks, and they're traveling and they're on this mountain pass, and seemingly should be no one here. But there's this beautiful woman.
Okay. Yes,
and she's stranded. Yep. And she can't, she's on her way to a fine event, and she can't get her dress wet going through this stream, and she's stranded. So this master picks this beautiful woman up, lifts her up, and carries her across the stream and sets her down. His disciple is like
furious,
and he doesn't say anything until probably about 6 or 7 hours
because
later.
There's a rule that the monks are not to interact and definitely not touch another person. Yes,
exactly.
Yes,
and especially a female, of all things.
Right.
So the monk, the disciple, finally says, "How do you defend yourself? What are you doing?" And is like, "Tell me what you're talking about." He goes, "Well, the woman, you carried her, you touched her, and stuff." He says, "Young Padawan," or whatever they say. I put that woman down 6 hours ago. You are still carrying her in your mind.
I love that story. I do know that story. It's so good. Yeah, you're still hanging on to it.
But that's the thing. The disciple is suffering for 6 hours over the anguish and the judgment of what had taken place 6 hours ago.
Yeah.
And is suffering as a result of it. And the master is like, listen, I set her down 6 hours ago.
Yeah. Young bhikkhu. The bhikkhus.
He's no longer in my, she's no longer in my bag.
That's good. Put her down with all your archives. And you are really great. I mean, I've also watched you archive things. There's a certain utility to that too. I mean, I've watched you do it in a healthy way, so to speak. Yeah. Well, so then we get to the ultimate question here, which is when we recognize that our peace, all the things you mentioned, compassion, our peace, our love, our joy, our calm, all these things are coming from within us. There's really only one question then. And you said it earlier, which is like, why not? Like, let's try this thing. Why not? It doesn't, if I try free the dream, if I try to set up this conference and I'm already at peace and I'm already enjoying, and I'm doing the things that, I'm who I am in the world already. Why not try it? Why not give it a shot? Why not go get a new career? Why not move to a new city? Why not try fill in the blank? There is a real freedom that we can start to experience in our life that I think we can skip over when we are thinking that external circumstances are what's going to bring us our joy, our final happiness. Yeah. So why not?
And my experience is those who have actually been able to find all of the peace, the love, the joy, the abundance, all of that within themselves. And it's no longer attached to any certain circumstance, any other person, anything of that nature. And when it's truly felt within, my understanding and my experience is I witness people who desire to create things in the world for the purpose of creating things in the world. As you stated earlier, they're not attached to any particular outcome.
Yeah.
And it just seems that those people, what they desire just flows naturally to them.
Totally agree. Totally agree. And I've experienced it thousands of times in my life. I've experienced the opposite. So lift the veil on your joy, your peace, your calm. Just lift it. And then why not? Just do whatever you want.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Daphne, calls to action.
Do it. Go
ahead. What do you have?
Well, I do not have other than I mentioned last week, the course, my Waking Up a Leader online course. I'll just repeat that here. And if you are a person in leadership who is especially newer in leadership, in a leadership role, please log on to daphne-scott.com. You can find the Waking Up a Leader course there. It will change your life. You will experience much greater levels of effectiveness because you are going to learn specific skills that will help you in leading a group of people, in which almost no one is taught when they get a promotion and are in charge of a team. So if you're in charge of a team, especially if you're in charge of a team and you're in charge of a budget, you will want to get access to this course. So go to daphne-scott.com. It's Waking Up a Leader. It's right on there. You can't miss it. I will have another call to action in 2 weeks, and I'm very excited about it. I'm not going to say anything more about it at this point, but on our show in 2 weeks, everyone will be hearing about it. So that's all I love it there. Yeah.
So I have 2 calls to action. One real quick. I just want to say, because what you had mentioned and brought up the other day or a couple weeks ago, daywithcliff.com is now live.
Yes.
So you can go to daywithcliff.com and see how you can spend an entire day of one-on-one coaching and mentoring with me. There's some incredible case studies on the sales page, one of which happens to be this beautiful woman named Daphne Scott. And so check it out. Daphne, or it's daywithcliff.com. So
great.
The second one, by the way, is I recognize that there are many people who are listening to our podcast and they have had a ton of experience coaching individuals in a leadership capacity, and maybe some in a ministry capacity or a nonprofit or any other capacity. And maybe you've been doing that for so many years, and your heart and your desire is to go down the professional coaching path, to be a full-time coach and have that be what earns your living. If that's you, I have a brand new URL, professionalcoachingpath.com.
Professionalcoachingpath.com. Okay.
Professionalcoachingpath.com. And this is a brand new monthly group coaching program for taking your coaching experience of full-time profession and career to a whole new level of success, specifically overcoming the fear of self-promotion, marketing yourself, trying to figure out how to do this without compromising your values when it comes to how you feel about just a lot of self-promotion, but also not only to master client acquisition, but also learning some of the frameworks and strategies, tools, and formulas that I've invested more than $100,000 of my own over the last few decades learning and mastering. So I would love to help teach you in the Next Level Coaching Program, which you can find out more at professionalcoachingpath.com.
Awesome. I'm going to put all of that in the show notes as well. So there we
Sweet.
go. I really do. The day with Cliff, I think, is just, I highly recommend it. I can't say enough about it. And I've done it twice. I think I've mentioned this on the show before too. It's just, it is a path to clarity. I will say that much and more.
Yeah. And there's nothing better than to get out of your normal routine, your normal atmosphere, environment, and thinking with clarity about what it is you want to create next in this world. So
yeah. Totally. By the way, I have my first real music gig coming up in 3 weeks. My first paid music gig.
Nice.
I just wanted to say that. Yeah. I don't think I told you that. Yeah. Just came up.
This is the harp and drum duo.
Yeah. If you're in Oklahoma, we are going to be playing on Saturday night at the Festival of the Arts on the main stage, 7:00, April 27th.
Oh,
so I know.
Who wouldn't want to come to that?
Yeah. Who wouldn't want to come? You can hear me sing Country Roads, the harmonizing part.
I like it.
Yeah. It's fun. Okay.
Thank you all so much. Until next time, we encourage you to choose life and to take this ultimate game to a whole new level of experience.
Bye.
All right. I think we are